Hetty Durham was drop-dead gorgeous. No one could argue that. What he enjoyed most was that she was a toucher, nothing inappropriate, nothing showy. She simply touched his arm as she brushed past or rested her hand gently on his shoulder when she stood behind the seat in the cockpit. Main character is a respectable, quote-unquote, pilot who wants to cheat on his wife. Stereotypical atheists wants to do wrong things cliche. A kidnapped and tortured Rosenwig could be forced to reveal a secret that would similarly revolutionize any nation in the world. Imagine what the formula might do if modified to work on the vast tundra of Russia. Could regions bloom whose snow covered most of the year? So you could solve world hunger and all these other problems, but you're going to keep the formula because money. Streamlining world finance to 3 major currencies had taken years, but once the change was made, most were happy with it. So, forcing countries to switch currencies, how does that not cause, like, worldwide war? Determined to dominate and occupy the Holy Land, the Russians had launched an attack against Israel in the middle of the night. This assault became known as the Russian Pearl Harbor. So, yeah, screw Russia. They're jerks, right, guys? Had Buck not been there and seen it himself, he would not have believed it, and it took him more than a week to get any reader of the Global Weekly to buy it either. Editors and readers had their own explanations for the phenomenon, but so Buck was the only journalist in Israel during the attack. Buck was stunned when he read Ezekiel 38 and 39 about a great enemy from the north invading Israel with the help of Persia, Libya, and Ethiopia. More stark were the scriptures foretold of weapons of war used as fire fuel and enemy soldiers eaten by birds or buried in a common grave. Author subtly notes that he's taking a little bit of inspiration from the Bible. Not sure whether he'd follow through with anything overt, Captain Rayford Steele felt an irresistible urge to see Hattie Durman right then. He unstrapped himself and squeezed his first officer's shoulder on his way out of the cockpit. Pilot stops flying the plane to see his crush. Hattie pressed him back against the cockpit compartments, her face close to his. Had she not been clearly terrified, he might have enjoyed this and returned her embrace. Her knees buckled as she tried to speak, and her voice came in a whiny squeal. Hattie takes time to make the situation awkward instead of relaying vital information. First one, then another cried out when they realized their seatmates were missing, but that their clothes were still there. God leaves a big pile of dirty laundry for everyone else to clean up. The terrifying truth was that he knew it all too well. Irene had been right. He and most of his passengers had been left behind. Roll credits. Buck was soon met by a senior flight attendant. Sir, I need to ask you to return you to your seat and fasten your belt. I'm looking for this woman's husband. Everyone is looking for someone, she said. We hope to have some information for you in a few minutes. So Buck, an intelligent man, hasn't realized that everyone's missing yet. Fear seemed to pervade the cabin as he climbed over his sleeping seamate again. He stood and leaned over the back of the chair ahead of him. So Buck's neighbor sitting next to him hasn't woken up yet during the actual rapture. I must tell you, however, that our location makes it extremely difficult to communicate with the ground without long delays. Even in the satellite age, we're in a pretty remote area. Somehow in the future, we can't communicate instantly with the people on the ground. Buck's seatmate roused, drooling, when an attendant asked if anyone in his party was missing. Missing? No, and there's nobody in this party but me. He curled up again and went back to sleep, unaware. Ha ha, I'm an idiot. These people materially disappeared. Only thing I can compare it to is the old Star Trek shows where people got dematerialized and rematerialized, beamed all over the place. Can you imagine people boarding upon the Enterprise, like dozens of people, all completely naked? Word we get is that every country has been affected. See in Chicago? Roger. Roger, Roger. Buck's seatmate peered at Buck with a disgusted look and slurred, "If we're not crashing, don't bother me." I swear, if this guy was actually taken, he would have slept right through eternity. Overall, though, props to the book for getting right to the action and immediately taking everyone within the first few pages. The in-flight phone embedded in the back of the seat in front of Buck Williams was not assembled with external modular connections the way home phones were. That way no one could simply snap the unit away and from its connecting line and walk off with it. Your 1995 is showing. Buck opened his computer and cut the wire leading to the female connector. Inside the phone, he cut the wire and sliced off the protected rubber coating. Sure enough, the four inner wires from both computer and phone looked identical. Buck cannibalizes the plane instead of waiting for it to land. Don't patronize me, sir. I can't let you sit here and vandalize airline property. I'm not vandalizing it. I'm adapting in an emergency. You can, I can, and you'd help me. Deal. Hattie, you're doing the right thing. Buck argues with airline staff for 2 full pages of the book. You have to admit, when people disappear, some rules go out of the window. Sure, anarchy always helps. Buck stared at her. What was she driving at? Sir, we lost every child and baby on this plane. And with that line, author sparks one of the largest debates about the rapture ever. Passengers were instructed to remove their shoes and to jump seat first onto the chute. Seat first. Christopher said, "Suit yourself, Cap. You mind if I take him up on his offer for a ride back to the terminal?" Rayford glared at him. "You're serious? I don't get paid enough for this." "How much do you think you should get paid?" In shops where Staffords had disappeared, looters walked off with merchandise. See? Anarchy, it works. It's your responsibility to be back here for your next flight or to call in and find out its status. Yeah, you'll definitely be there for that next flight. CNN reran the footage in super slow motion, showing the woman going from very pregnant to nearly flat-stomached, as if she instantaneously delivered. CNN. A funeral home in Australia reported that nearly every mourner disappeared from one memorial service, including the corpse. Including the corpse? Isn't the soul already in heaven, or do you need to bring the body too? At a Christian high school soccer game at a missionary headquarters in Indonesia, most of the spectators and all but one of the players disappeared in the middle of play, leaving their shoes and uniforms on the ground. The CNN reporter announced that, in his remorse, the surviving player took his own life. But you could have scored! There's no goalie! As they skipped down the stairs, Hattie said, "Wasn't it awful about Chris?" "What about him?" "You really don't know?" Instead of saying what she needs to say, Hattie always says, "You really don't know." Just say it. Was there a suicide? Rayford asked. Lots of them, I guess, but mostly passengers. Only crew member I heard about was a Smith from Pan. Slit his wrists. Man, you really don't want to kill yourself after the rapture. It's just a bad idea. Don't kill yourself in general, but after the rapture especially, it's a bad idea. She was beautiful and sexy and smart. Oh my gosh, seriously? Right now? During the rapture? email was from Steve and was for Buck's eyes only. Buck, ignore general staff memo. Get to New York as soon as you can at any expense. Turn the page and 2 full pages. Longest email ever. And you read it while you're standing in line for the phone. I'm not ready to start believing the tabloids. You just know they're going to be saying the space aliens finally got us. Editor-in-chief makes jokes about the disappearance of millions of people. Everyone we know who's gone is either a child or a very nice person. On the other hand, some truly wonderful people are still here. I'm glad you're one of them, and so is Steve. Call us. Anti-atheists are all jerks cliche, so props to that. One of the women behind the counter hollered at him that he'd have to unplug. He smiled at her. And if I don't, are you going to have me thrown out, arrested? Cut me some slack, today of all days. Yeah, be rude. That really helps. Great job, man. You could pray for me if you think of it. I don't know if I can endure this. I'm not much for praying, Rayford admitted. You will be, she said. I never was before either, but I am now. You will be. You will be. She looked at him tolerantly and said, what can I not do for you? Oh, you mean because I did not do something you asked? No, she said, I'm saying that to everyone. It's my little joke because there's really nothing I can do for anybody. Yeah, because playing around with panic people is just a great idea. You're the youngest award winner or most cover stories by someone under 12? Funny, or something. I can't believe we're joking on a day like this, Buck said. Buck Williams would be excellent at... What is this I'm doing? Book sins? Literary sins? Whatever this is. The picture was signed, To Ramey, with love, Dad. Under that he had written, Rayford Steele, Captain, Continental Airlines, O'Hare. He shook his head. What kind of dad autographs a picture for his own son? Rayford Steele would be excellent at... Rayford set the cookies on the bedside table, their essence filling the air. Cookie essence. Tucked in a special pouch inside his jeans, he carried thousands of dollars worth of traveler's checks, redeemable in dollars, marks, or yen. Yeah, but what about Monopoly money? The Global Weekly's bureau chief, a 50ish black woman named Lucinda Washington. Black woman with an unusual name cliche. She had laughed, and they had parted with a friendly embrace. That had been 3 days ago. Hugging your coworker. Buck was not convinced. One global currency? It'll never happen, he said. How can you flatly say that? Too bizarre, too impractical. Look what happened in the States when they tried to bring the metric system. So we've got 3 world currencies, but the United States is still using the imperial system? Oh no, Rayford, I'm sorry. Is there anything I can do? No thanks. Do you want some company? No thanks. I'm scared. So am I, Hattie. What are we going to do? Sections in only dialogue without, like, saying who's saying what really confuse me. And that's one of my least favorite parts about books. You tell your crew you're taking a bathroom break, but you don't go into detail about what you're doing in there, do you? Toilet talk. Irene and Ramey would not be coming back, and he did not know if he would ever see them again because he did not know if there were second chances on this heaven thing. That's got to be tough, not knowing if you're completely screwed or not. Props to that. Rayford had worried that his son might be a mama's boy. Too compassionate, too sensitive, too caring. He was always looking out for someone else when Rayford thought he should be looking out for number one. Boys can't be sensitive or caring stereotype. They would be on a mission, a quest for truth. Left Behind 4, the quest for truth. The hotel had a phone, however, and a shower and a bed and a TV. Rundown as it was, it would suffice. So this rundown hotel has a phone, a TV. What more do you want? I asked our pastor. He said if it was Jesus Christ taking people to heaven, he and I and you and Jeff would be gone too. Makes sense. Well, that pastor's doing something wrong. Buck remembered the many earthquakes and wars of the last decade, and the nightly coverage that was so moving. In one line, Buck casually mentions major events with no other context whatsoever. Buck was the type of person who could look at his watch before retiring and wake up precisely when he told himself to. It was nearly midnight, he would be up at 5:30. That's freaky. A popular young businessman / politician assumed the role of president of Romania. Nicolae Carpathia, a 33-year-old born in Cluj, had in recent months taken the nation by storm with his popular, persuasive speaking. So apparently the Antichrist is Romanian. Dangest thing I've ever seen. Of course, that don't make me unique. I have to say, though, I've always believed in the UFOs, Ritz said. You're kidding! A level-headed, safety-conscious pilot? Buck really needs to stop sending other characters. They disappeared in an instant, so they had to be dematerialized. The question is whether they were destroyed in the process or could be reassembled. This guy has spent way too long thinking about this. Rayford hoped there'd be some corresponding verse to Genesis 1:1 at the end of the Bible that said something like, "In the end, God took all his people to heaven and gave everyone else one more chance." But no such luck. The last verse in the Bible meant nothing to him. It said, "The grace of the Lord Jesus be with you all. Amen." And then he keeps reading backwards. So Rayford starts with the hardest book of the Bible, Revelations. He's going to have a tough time. Here and there he saw notes in the margins in Irene's delicate handwriting. Sometimes she wrote, "Precious." He was determined to study and find someone who could explain these passages to him. Irene didn't have Instagram for her special Bible verses. Rayford was revered, proudly introduced as a 747 captain to newcomers and guests to the church, and even served on the church board for several years. So Rayford was on the church board, the elder board, the deacon board, whatever, and he didn't know how to read the Bible. Leaning against a brick wall in an alley, in plain sight, was a yellow bicycle with a cardboard sign clipped to it. It read, "Borrow this bike. Take it where you like. Leave it for someone else in need. No charge." Only in New York, he thought, nobody steals something that's free. How does nobody steal that bike? It's New York! Chicago, Boston, New York, home win. Saturday night, good. Why? Got a date? Not funny. Oh gosh, I'm sorry, Captain. I forgot who I was talking to. Too soon, Hattie. Too soon. The only wrinkle in Carpathia's history are some rumors that he was ruthless with his business competition years ago. How ruthless? People took dirt naps. So the Antichrist has people killed, and no one's suspicious at all? We're talking Romania here, Buck. Romania. Non-strategic, scant, gross national product. Never invaded anybody, never anyone's strategic ally. There's nothing there but low-level internal politics. Nobody expects Romania. While he toyed with and hoped for an old-fashioned affair, he somehow couldn't bring himself to stoop to something as tawdry as paying for sex. Rayford is a coward. He can't commit to anything. His wife, an affair, his kids, even alcohol. He only realizes that he failed after he failed. His family's gone. He's pathetic. That's good character development. Plus 5 props. The few of us left are maintaining the building and distributing a videotape. Our senior pastor prepared for a time such as this. You may come by the church office anytime to pick up a free copy, and we look forward to seeing you on Sunday morning. Pastor also has a video about Noah and his ark, homosexuality, and the stoning of Stephen, if you want to watch those. What a creative idea! To tape a message for those who had been left behind. Roll credits, or whatever. Rayford ran from the house in his stocking feet and gathered Chloe into his arms. "Oh, Daddy," she wailed, "how's everybody?" College student, full-grown college student, calls her father Daddy. Daddy, in California, they're actually buying into the space invasion theory. I'm not saying it was aliens, but it was aliens. Her father took Chloe's hand, and she rose and sat in his lap, hiding her face and sobbing. Again, college student sits on her father's lap. Years ago, we'd have blamed it on the Soviets, said that they developed some super new technology, some death ray that affected only human flesh and bone. So Rayford remembers the Soviets, so this can't be too far in our future. Daddy, what does this make God? Some sick, sadistic dictator? Careful, honey, you think I'm wrong, but what if I'm right? Then God is spiteful, hateful, mean. Who wants to go to heaven with a God like that? Chloe would fit in on Reddit. We got a request from a crew member to be assigned to your next flight, only I think she was thinking you'd be going on that run tonight, Logan to JFK and back. Who, Hattie Durman? Let me see. Yeah, right. Does this woman have no friends? Oh, and I forgot to ding that for the last thing, so. Mr. Tompkins, you don't know me, but my name is Cameron Williams of the Global Weekly. Isn't this in the new Mission Impossible movie? But, I mean, how do you account for the fact that you're still here? Rayford asked. Mr. Steele, there's only one explanation for that, and I would prefer to discuss it with you in person, said the junior pastor. Dude, you done messed up. The pair took pints of dark ale to a booth in a secluded corner, but Alan never touched his. Buck, who hadn't eaten since the flight, switched his empty mug for Alan's full one and downed it too. Buck downs 2 pints of beer like it's nothing. Sir, I believe you had an employee murdered. And just as calm as you like, he says, "Tell you what, Governor," which is a term Cockneys use on each other. Haha, British stereotypes. I tried playing Mr. Brave Boy. I said, "I could be wired. I could be recording this conversation. Cool as can be," he said. Metal detectors would have picked it up. Wouldn't they have picked up keys and the like if he didn't know he was going through a metal detector, though? Sullivan, one of my idols, sounded like a little baby. He said, "Mr. Todd Cawthon, sir, you do whatever you need to do." And Todd Cawthon says, "What if I were to kill this man where he sits?" And Sullivan said, "Sir, I'm sure it would be justifiable homicide." Now get this, Todd Cawthon says, right over the phone to Scotland Yard, where you know they tape every incoming call. Todd Cawthon knows it just as well. What if his name happened to be Alan Tompkins? Just like that, plain as day? And Sullivan said, "I'd come over there and dispose of the body myself." Well, I got the picture. That man is freaking terrifying. +1 props. The barmaid was making some sort of announcement, asking people a question at every other table or so. As she neared them, Buck and Alan fell silent to hear, "Anyone driving a light green sedan?" "Fella says the inside light is on." The guys aren't remotely suspicious that there's a problem with this guy's car, even though Alan was recently threatened with murder. Alan mouthed silently that he would be in the car. Buck nodded. The reader can see it coming a mile away. "You wouldn't know where a fellow could get a hat like yours, would you?" Buck asked the cabbie as he paid. "This old thing? I might be persuaded to part with it. I've got more than one other just like it. A souvenir, eh?" "Will this do?" Buck said, pressing a large bill into his hand. "It'll more than do, sir, and thank you kindly." Just don't ask questions, Ralph. Don't ask questions. Buck paid cash for his tickets in the name of George Ariskovich, a naturalized Englishman from Poland on his way to holiday in the States via Frankfurt. Buck would never be able to do that in today's airports. The junior pastor said, "I can't imagine God would call me to take over this work, but if he does, I want to be ready." "And how will he call you?" Chloe said, a smile playing at her mouth. "By phone." You're hilarious. "Folks, Loretta there looks like I feel. We're shell-shocked and we're devastated because we know exactly what happened." "Or you think you do," Chloe said. Rayford tried to catch her eye to encourage her to back off, but she seemed unwilling to look at him. "There's every kind of theory you want on every TV show in the country. Debating in a situation where debate is not invited." Bruce Barnes sat back and looked at Chloe, then at her father. "I'm going to ask you something," he said, turning to her again. "Could you let me tell you my story briefly, without interrupting or saying anything, unless there's something you don't understand?" Oh, snap! He put her in her place. +1 props. Barnes took a deep breath and exhaled, wiping his eyes. "Well, I started phoning around," he said. "I started with the pastor, but of course I got his answering machine. A couple of other places I got answering machines too, so I grabbed the church directory and started looking up older folks, the people I thought might not like answering machines and wouldn't have one. I let their phones ring off the hook. No answers." So the assistant pastor is calling people during the rapture when no one else could call people because all the lines were busy. "There wasn't one of us who didn't know what it meant to be a true Christian. We knew we weren't, and that we had been left behind." Listen, I appreciate a good name drop. Really, I do. But this is 3 times, and we're only like halfway through the book. "I encourage people to share their faith, to tell other people how to become Christians, but on my own, I never did that. My job was to visit people in their homes and nursing homes and hospitals every day. I was good at it. I encouraged them, smiled at them, talked with them, prayed with them, even read scripture to them, but I never did it on my own, privately." This page and the next page really encourage one to reflect on their own salvation. And that's pretty good. So +1 props. Jesus Christ returned for his true family, and the rest of us were left behind. I'm going to send you home with the tape, and I'm going to go through this all in detail tomorrow morning at 10 for whoever shows up. I'll probably do the same lesson every Sunday morning for as long as people need to know. One thing I'm sure of, as important as all the other sermons and lessons are, nothing matters like this one. The new pastor is going to do the same sermon every week. I mean, isn't that a bit excessive? I mean, do that once in the church, and then take that message to the streets and preach something new, like read through Corinthians or whatnot. I don't know. Ask anyone on the street what they think the Bible or the church says about getting to heaven, and 9 out of 10 would say it has to do something with doing good and living right. 9 out of 10? I find that very hard to believe. But people die every day in car accidents, plane crashes. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sure you're a good pilot. Bad choice of words there. Bad choice of words, yeah. "Steve, you know who this is? No matter what you hear in the next 24 hours, I'm all right. If it's after the next 24 hours, though, then you might want to start worrying, okay?" The news was full of crime, looting, people taking advantage of the chaos. People were being shot, maimed, raped, killed. The roadways were more dangerous than ever. Emergency units were understaffed. Book converts The Purge in 1995. It had become an ugly world overnight, and Rayford was worried about his and Chloe's safety. But the rapture was a week ago, not last night. That you are watching this tape indicates you have been left behind. The screen began to scroll with a passage of scripture. Rayford hit the pause button and ran to get Irene's Bible. A pastor edits this video with on-screen text in 1995. There was no Windows Live Movie Maker or anything. Up to a certain age, which is probably different for each individual, we believe God will not hold a child accountable for a decision that must be made with heart and mind, fully cognizant of the ramifications. This is not backed up by the Bible. Author inserted this as a way not to offend people. And am I saying that kids won't be taken to heaven when the rapture happens? No, I'm not saying that. But am I saying that the Bible doesn't talk about that? Yeah, I am. So, the Bible doesn't say that they will without believing in God. Plus 3 sins. God has removed his church from a corrupt world that seeks its own way, its own pleasures, and its own ends. The pastor should have seen 2018. Let me warn you personally to beware of such a leader of humanity who may emerge from Europe. From Europe? I mean, you're right, but how? I believe the Bible teaches that the rapture of the church ushers in a 7-year period of trial and tribulation. Only the ushers? Won't every... Oh... Maybe you should say that will usher in a new period instead of the rapture of the church ushers. Because that's a bit confusing. It was time for Rayford to move beyond being a critic and analyst, never satisfied with the evidence. Not for me, obviously. I urge you to find books on this subject, or find people who may have been experts in this area, but for some reason did not receive Christ before and were left behind. The pastor said, "Pray after me," and Rayford did. Repeat after me prayer. Rayford got to the church just before 10 o'clock and was shocked to have to park nearly 3 blocks away. The place was packed. People were coming to church, and not just to play church. This might be the realest church service in a long time. Oh wait, +1 props for that, yeah. When Rayford shook his hand, Bruce asked, "Are you busy this afternoon? Would you be able to join me for a bite?" So church is packed today. There's tons of new believers who don't really know much about Jesus. And Pastor asks Rayford out to lunch. Now that's alright, Hattie. And I know, however overwhelming this has been for you, because it's been for me too. I've got a lot to talk to you about, actually. You do? Could we get together sometime soon? Main character is setting himself up for some serious temptation. Buck Williams sat near an exit at JFK Airport, reading his own obituary. That's the first line of that chapter. That's a great opening line. +1 props. Rayford Steele had a plan. He had decided to be honest with Chloe about his attraction to Hattie Durham and how guilty he felt about it. Danger, Will Robinson! Danger, danger! Abort, abort! Over lunch, he told Chloe of his history with Hattie, such as it was. She was silent a long time, and when she spoke, her voice was weak. "So you never actually acted on it?" she said. "That went better than I expected, actually." "I'm going to invite Hattie to dinner with us this week," he said. Chloe narrowed her eyes. "What, you feel like you're available now?" Chloe would be good at whatever this is I'm doing. "Obviously, I care much more about you than I do Hattie. You should have thought of that before you risked everything to chase her." Now there's the argument I was expecting. Good job, yeah. "I want Hattie to take me seriously when I tell her what I think she needs now." "I don't know, Dad. I think it's a little too soon to be pushing her towards God." So Chloe stops calling him Daddy, and now she's calling her Dad. She sees him differently now. +1 props. He mentioned respectfully that he was aware that it had not been a full week yet since the disappearance of millions all over the world. It hasn't been a full week yet? But I thought we passed the full week like 10 chapters ago or something like that.
Carpathia spoke primarily in perfect English with only a hint of a Romanian accent. He used no contractions and enunciated every syllable of every word. As a writer, I know how hard it is to not use contractions, even instinctually. That's just nearly impossible. So, Carpathia smiled and nodded at each as they rose, and nearly every country was represented. Because of the cosmic trauma the world had endured, they had come looking for answers, for help, for support. This scene mirrors the church scene. Both have people looking for answers, and both have broken people, but both offer different responses. +1 props. By the time Carpathia got into the S countries in his alphabetical listing, those standing had begun to quietly applaud each new country mentioned. It was a dignified, powerful thing, this show of respect and admiration, this re-welcoming of the global village. If you didn't know that this man was the Antichrist in the book and you're just reading along, you might think he's like semi-hypnotic. He's really charming. Add another prop. On and on he thundered as people stood and clapped. Somalia, South Africa, Spain, Sri Lanka, Sudan, Suriname, Swaziland, Sweden, Syria. This man has really good, like, creepily good memory. He's naming every single country in order, alphabetical order. Rayford retrieved his phone from the BMW and turned the ignition switch far enough to read the gas gauge. BMW. Carpathia's schedule is full all day, and he has a photo shoot at People magazine early this evening. People magazine. Dr. Rosenzweig believes that some confluence of electromagnetism in the atmosphere, combined with as yet unknown or unexplained atomic ionization from the nuclear power and weaponry throughout the world, could have been ignited or triggered, perhaps by a natural cause like lightning, or even an intelligent life form that discovered this possibility before we did, and caused the instant action throughout the world. So someone reversed the polarity of the neutron flow. At this point, they are postulating that certain people's levels of electricity made them more likely to be affected. So Electro is somewhere up in heaven right now. By the time of the evening network news, a new international star had been born. Carpathia even had a nickname, Saint Nick. Santa is the Antichrist, confirmed. Rayford guessed he was a half hour behind Chloe, and he was impressed that she had left the garage door open for him. Impressed? I'd be mad as all heck. In Anarchyville? Someone could have stolen my four-wheeler. Rayford walked around the Jeep at the end. Ramey's stuff was missing. His bike, his four-wheeler. What was this? See? Ooh. Who's that? Steve called out to Buck. Just a girl, he said. Nice? Better than nice. Gorgeous. Oh, so now you like Hattie too? While they were out, Rayford bought items that needed to be replaced right away, including a TV and a VCR. I'm surprised all the TVs haven't been looted yet. Also, VCR players. Is it not also true that they have already named you, Nikolai Carpathia, their newest, sexiest man alive? I do not know what that means, really. Finally, a lie I can't believe. Chloe smiled. So you're not going to start comparing Carpathia with the liar the pastor's tape warned us of, somebody from Europe who comes to take over the world? The author subtly uses Chloe to hint that Carpathia might be the Antichrist. Very subtle, very just subtle. Rayford sighed. Yes, there were many times I wish it was something more. Well, glory be, I missed my guess. I'd given up, figured you were an untouchable, Hattie said. Goodness gracious, this conversation. My gosh. Give me the basics, she said, and I'll tell you if I want to hear about it. Absolutely not, Rayford said, surprising himself with his resolve. That I will not do, except in person. Then I'm not coming. Hattie. Goodbye, Rayford. She hung up. Yeah, bad idea inviting her over. Bad freaking idea. Buck grabbed Miller's shirt at the neck and pressed him against the wall. "You took those pictures of Spider-Man, didn't you?" They sat and he pushed a speaker button on the phone. "This is Nikolai Carpathia speaking. Mr. Carpathia, this is Fitz, Gerald Fitzhugh. Mr. President, I am honored to hear from you." So, in this universe, Bill Clinton is called Gerald Fitzhugh. Well, take it from a guy who's been in the saddle for 6 years, you don't ever get used to it. So, Fitz has been president for 6 years, so is the year 1998, or is it 2002, or what's the time frame here? Buck could not breathe. What was Carpathia implying? Buck stared at him, unable to move, unable to respond. Carpathia continued. "Secretary General Numo presides over a country that is starving. The world is ripe for my plan of 10 members of the Security Council. These things will work together. The Secretary General must devote his time to the problems within Botswana. Let the right and seven, if he will do that, he must be happy." This conversation's been going on for so long, so many pages. I'm completely lost. Of course, the Orthodox Jews here are in an uproar, charging the two with desecrating this holy place by proclaiming that Jesus Christ of the New Testament is the fulfillment of the Torah's prophecy of a Messiah. Sounds like they're about to crucify these two upside down. I'll take the time to carefully teach you this over the next several weeks, but it looks to me, as to many of the experts who came before us, that this period of history we're in right now will last for 7 years. The first 21 months encompass what the Bible calls the 7 seal judgments. This section where Bruce is talking about all this happens right after Carpathia says there will be 7 years of peace in Jerusalem. +1 props. The last half of the 7 years is called the Great Tribulation, and if we're alive by the end of it, we'll be rewarded by seeing the glorious appearing of Christ. At this point, everyone was starting to get worried about why he was saying, if we're alive by the end of it. And then later it says, if we somehow make it through the 7 terrible years, especially the last half, the glorious appearing will be all that more glorious. So, oh yeah, we could all die horrible deaths. As the rich get richer, the poor starve to death. More millions will die that way. So if we survive the war, we need a stockpile of food? Bruce nodded. I would. Finally! Apocalypse survival tactics. Yes! That last one was a prop, not a sin. The 7th seal introduces 7 trumpet judgments, which will take place in the second quarter of the 7-year period. The second 21 months, clarified. And with that, author sets up the next 24 books or whatever there are in this series. They had all seen it. The report of the 2 crazy men preaching about Jesus at the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem. They had all seen it? I find that very hard to believe, too. Buck, Steve said. Eric Miller's body washed up on Staten Island last night. He fell off the ferry and drowned. Well, Bailey said similarly, enough of that ugly business. Steve has recommended you to replace him. They immediately changed that subject off of the potential murder to business stuff. That was a weak. There we go. Only Marge knows. Oh, we can trust her. She'll never tell Saul. I had a 3-year affair with her and never worried about anyone finding out. Steve and Buck flinched. Well, you never knew, did you? No, they said in unison. See how tight-lipped she is? He waited a beat. I'm kidding, boys, I'm kidding. Yeah, joking about an affair. That's just hilarious. Good job. Yeah. Who wouldn't want this job besides me, Steve said. If it's such a plum, why don't you want it? Buck, it's a great job. Just take the job. The one called Moishi answered, and I quote, "Where we come from and where we go, you cannot know." Where did you come from? And where did you go? Where did you come from, Cotton Eye Joe? The one wielding the knife surges forward first, displaying his weapon to Moishi, who had been speaking. Eli, behind him, immediately falls to his knees, his face towards the sky. Moishi stops speaking and merely looks at the man, who appears to trip. Welcome to Standing Up School, and you fail. I'm guessing she won't show, Chloe said. Why? Because I wouldn't if I were her. You're not her, thank God. Oh, don't put her down, Dad. What makes you any better?
Wow, rude.
Doc, I feel kind of stupid about this, and maybe you should just say no, that he's too busy. I know he's got a lot on his plate, and this girl is no one he needs to meet. It's a girl? Well, a young woman. She's a flight attendant. You want me to meet a flight attendant? Doc, no, don't ask him. But he did. Roosevelt came back on and said, Nicolay says that a friend of yours is a friend of his. He has a few moments, but only a few moments right now.
Somehow that worked.
Nicolay seemed transfixed by the images. He continued to watch as he talked. I wonder what he thought of my choice for press secretary and Hattie. I was stunned, said Buck. Man, this guy is just so charming. I'm really liking Carpathia, and I know he's the Antichrist in this book. +1 props. If Bruce Barnes was right, the disappearance of God's people was only the beginning of the most cataclysmic period in the history of the world. And here I am, Rayford thought, worrying about offending people. I'm liable to not offend my own daughter right into hell. This guy gets it. +1 props. Have you been watching TV this morning? From a distance here in the terminal, they keep rerunning the attack. Rayford, get to a TV right now. What? I'm hanging up, Ray. See what happened to the attackers, and see if that doesn't confirm everything we read about the two witnesses.
I'm sitting here in an airport. You better come see this cliche.
I hear they've been renovating that city for years. Millions of dollars invested in making it. What? New Babylon? Billions. Excuse me. New Babylon's the name of my new rock band. Her son believes she and the rest of her family were taken to heaven. So how'd he get left behind?
Name drop!
I'll ask him. You should meet his daughter anyway. She's a doll, Hattie said. She's a doll. Your 1995 is showing. Buck was stunned. He loved Chloe's name, her eyes, her smile. She looked directly at him and gave him a firm handshake, something he liked in a woman. Dude, she's 20. You're 34 years old. Correction, just 30, but still 10 years of age. Again, this was a girl he could be interested in, but she had to be at least 10 years younger than he was. What is it with crushes in this book and girls way too young for the guys? Buck noticed a dab of chocolate at the corner of her mouth. He said, "May I?" extending his hand. She raised her chin, and he transferred the chocolate to his thumb. "Creep alert! Creep alert! Danger! Danger! Creep alert!" I'm sorry, Chloe. I didn't mean to imply that I'm not interested in your theory. It's not that, she said. But you just kind of categorized me there. Categorized you? As a college kid.
Did you just assume my lifestyle?
I was just going to say that I like the way you say my name. I didn't know there were any other ways to say it. Oh, there are. Even my friends slip into making it one syllable, like Chloe. Ugh. I'm a man who suffers from secondhand embarrassment, like really bad. My levels are just like through the roof right now. Ooh, ugh. Hattie returned slightly refreshed but still puffy-eyed and sat again, as if ready for more punishment. 50 Shades of Left Behind. After nearly half an hour, he exhausted his new knowledge, and he concluded, Hattie, I want you to think about it, consider it, watch the tape, talk to Bruce. Man, she's been sitting there for half an hour? She must be really uncomfortable. Rayford thought his daughter looked stunning that evening, and he wondered what the magazine writer thought of her. Clearly, this Williams guy was too old for her. This guy gets it. But he was interested in Hattie before, so... For the first time in his memory, Buck Williams was speechless. Break? Rayford was certain that he was not getting through. He only hoped this writer was astute enough to understand, to quote him correctly, to represent his views in such a way that readers might look into Christianity. So this is amazing. This is Rayford thinks he's failing, while Buck is about to cry. +1 props. It might be worth a call if you want to know any more. Bruce Barnes, New Hope Village Church, Mount Prospect. I'll keep that in mind, Buck said. Rayford was convinced Williams was merely being polite. This is a good conversation. Neither knows what the other one is thinking. Good job. +1 props. When Chloe didn't move to watch the safety instructions, Buck grew impatient. Still, he didn't want to reveal himself. He wanted to be discovered, and so he waited. I wonder how long this will go on for. Rayford stood and embraced Chloe. They both appeared overcome with emotion. A middle-aged couple across the aisle leaned out and stared, brows raised. The captain noticed, straightened, and headed toward the cockpit. My daughter, he said awkwardly, pointing at Chloe, who smiled through her tears. She's my daughter. The couple looked at each other, and the woman spoke. Right, and I'm the Queen of England. You sickos. Can you make it? Guess I'd better. How much press will be there? You ready for this? Only you. You're kidding. I'm serious. He likes you, Buck. Carpathia wants to be more popular, so why wouldn't he have more press there at this meeting? One thing we need to do, Rayford said to Chloe, is to get your own Bible. You're going to wear that one out. I want to join that core group of yours, she said. I want to get all the stuff from Bruce firsthand. The only part that bothers me is it sounds like things are going to get worse. Wow, Chloe's really going 0 to 100 here in her walk with Christianity. Went from nothing to like all the way in, 100%. Oh wait, yeah. I've been praying about sort of an inner circle of people who want to do more than just survive. What are you getting at? Rayford asked. Going on the offensive? So, an inner circle within the inner circle in the church. Church politics. So your little group inside the group, a sort of green berets, would be your tribulation force. Tribulation force, Bruce said, looking at Rayford and rising to scribble it on his flip chart. Dumbledore's army. We will be the naked ones, the ones devoid of the protection of belonging to the majority. You still want to be a part of this tribulation force? Rayford nodded and smiled at his daughter's firm reply. I wouldn't miss it. That girl is bad to the bone. +1 props. I think. No, never mind. That's a sin, apparently. I have enough energy to go to midnight if you do, Bruce said. I'm all yours, Buck replied. Bruce spent the next several hours giving Buck a crash course in prophecy and the end times. So Buck is on the other end of the interview now. Bruce is giving him all the information without Buck even asking. +1 props. Church Sunday? I must say, it's going to be the same theme I use every Sunday. You've heard it from Ray Steele, and you've heard it from me. If hearing it one more time would help, come on out and see how many seekers and finders there are. He's still preaching the same sermon. Steve, I'm here. Well, have you heard of any events that lead Carpathia to the end times events in the Bible? Anyone that thinks he might fill the bill for one of the villains in the book of Revelations? Steve said nothing. Hello, Steve. I'm still here. Come on, old buddy. You're the press secretary. You know all. How he's going to respond if I hit him with that? Steve was still silent. Ah, the cold shoulder. Would you do something I've never asked anyone to do for me ever before? Would you pray for me? I'll call you soon or I'll see you soon. I promise. Buck. That's a good line right there. +1 props. The lights seemed to grow dimmer. The walls closed in. His pulse increased, and he had a sense of foreboding. The reader knows something bad is about to happen, and that's really good. +1 props. I'm on page 444 of 470, and if I didn't know that there were other books in this series, I'd say, how are they going to fit 7 more years of tribulation and everything into the rest of this book, or even maybe a sequel? Of course, there's 30 other books in this series, so that's a sin. Buck could not move until Steve Plank noticed him. Buck, we're almost ready to begin. Come on in. But Buck felt terrible, panicky. Steve, I need to run to the washroom. Do I have a minute? So, the first time I watched the movie for Left Behind, the only movie that they ever made for Left Behind, um, we came to this scene, and I was with my youth group, and I was sitting next to one of my best friends, and still one of my best friends. And this is the scene where Buck gets saved and believes in Jesus and everything like that. And my friend leans over to me, and he whispers, "Bathroom conversion," and I cracked up. So, bathroom conversion. While no special feeling had come with Buck's decision, he had a heightened sensitivity that something was happening here. There wasn't a doubt in his mind that the Antichrist of the Bible was in this room. Could you imagine sitting in the same room with someone that you know is the Antichrist, even if you're not sure who it is, and not peeing yourself? Oh, +1 props, that was a prop. Obviously, Carpathia had merely misspoken, and should have referred to the man as one of his financial advisors. This guy doesn't misspeak the entire time you knew him. It's said that he never misspeaks, and now you're just assuming that he made a mistake. "Miss Durham," he said, taking both her hands in his, "you shall be introduced as my personal assistant. Having turned your back on a stellar career in the aviation industry, I welcome you to the team and confer upon you all the rights and privileges that go with your new station." Hattie is Buck's mirror, except she didn't pray for God's protection. That. "Mr. Stonegall, you may be seated." "I will not," Stonegall said. "Sir, I've been having a bit of sport at your expense because I knew you would understand." "A bit of sport? A bit of sport?" "I observed, sir, that you were issued a .38 caliber police special with a 4-inch barrel loaded with high-velocity hollow-point shells." "You're correct, sir," Artemis said gleefully. There's the fantastic creepiness of the Antichrist again. +1 props. "Everyone be seated, please," Carpathia said. "Jonathan, on your knees." Painfully, the old man crouched, using Hattie's chair for support. He did not face Carpathia or look at him. The gun was still in his ear. Carpathia loves to put on a show, and this scene is just so crazy, and it's fantastic putting on a show, and the tension is building. Good. +1 props. Let's go. "My dear," Carpathia said to Hattie, leaning toward her over Stonegall's head, "you will want to slide your chair back about 3 feet or so as not to soil your outfit." At least he cares about her clothes. "Hair, skin, skull tissue, and brain matter will be mostly absorbed by Mr. Tonkartham and the others next to him. I do not want anything to get on you." Oh, that is brutal. That's absolutely savage. +1 props. "A high-velocity bullet at this range will also kill Mr. Todd Carthren, which, as you know, Mr. Williams, is something I promised you I would deal with in due time." Pulling a genius way of keeping a promise. +1. No, that's a sin. When Carpathia got to him, Buck's cheeks were wet and could not speak. He shook his head and held up a hand. Awful, was it not, Cameron? The suicide that took Mr. Todd Carthren with it? Buck could not speak and wouldn't have if he could. Your Jedi mind tricks are no match for my mind. I just talked to 4 people who were there, including the UN guard and Carpathia's personal assistant, not to mention Plank. None of them saw you. You weren't there. A cop saw me. We traded cards. I'm coming back to the office, Williams. If you're not there when I get there, you're fired. This guy's your best reporter ever, and you're gonna fire him for supposedly missing one meeting? Some final notes. This is not a bad book. It's actually a really, really good book, and I highly recommend it. Read this book. The characters are all really well written, so +1 props. There we go. The story isn't too hard to follow, but it isn't too simple, so +1 props. And it is very accurate to its source material. +1 props. A big complaint is that the book isn't really timeless. I feel trapped in a world without reliable cell phones or reliable internet, so plus one sins. And I know that this is a sins video, sort of, but I really can't help throwing in some props. So remove 3 sins for every prop. And if my math is correct, we should have 172 sins. That's a lot of sins. But we have 31 props, so times 3, that's 93 points off. So the total for this video, if I did my math correctly, I think we have 79 sins. 79 sins. And the sentence, because that's just silliness, sitting on Daddy's lap. Hope you enjoyed. Bonus round. So is the movie accurate to the book? And I'm talking about the movie that was made in the 90s or early 2000s, not the Nicolas Cage one that doesn't exist at all. In the movie, Buck works for CNN, GNN. Chloe lives at home instead of at college, and we see Irene and Ray Jr. in the beginning of the movie, so that's a difference. Rayford knows Bruce at the start of the movie already. There's no 3 world currencies. Dirk, the crazy guy, he's even crazier in this movie. We see Stronggle a lot in this movie, and we never see him in the book except for the meeting at the end. The movie sets up a lot of stuff before the rapture, and the book just gets straight into the action. Buck knows Hattie, the airline pilot, or stewardess, before the rapture. There's very little time spent on the plane. President dies. The President of America dies. Rayford somehow gets his car out of the airport, and he gets to drive it home. Buck is with Rayford when Rayford finds out that Irene and Ramey Jr. are gone. Marital law? That's not right. Martial law. It's whatever. Martial law is enacted, so there's martial law in America in the movie. And Buck meets Chloe way early in the movie compared to in the book. Buck has a disc with codes that are using Bible verses or something like that, and it's just way strange. Chloe walks in on Rayford and Hattie at home, and that's awkward in many ways. And Rayford, immediately after he gets saved, tells Hattie about the Bible and everything. The movie is more so for Christians only, and this one I have starred. It's for Christians. The book, anyone can read it. I encourage anyone to read it. The movie, it's more of a movie just for Christians. Buck meets Alan in Chicago in this movie instead of in England, I think is where it was in the last one. In the book. Buck hides out at the Steele house after Alan's death, so he's in hiding there. Buck comes to the church with Ray before learning the rapture theory, so he doesn't have the interview with Ray. The movie skips right over the 2 witnesses that are at the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem. And yet, the bathroom conversion still remains. We see no core group at the church or a tribulation force or anything, so I don't know how they would set that up in potential sequels. They skip over a few press conferences that Carpathia had and such like that. Carpathia goes into the Bible. He uses Bible verses for whatever reason as the Antichrist. Do you think he wouldn't use that? There's in the meeting at the end is more obvious hypnosis and less like shocked and fear and just like, okay, everyone forget it now. And Carpathia shoots the 2 men with 2 shots, one for each of them, instead of just 1 shot straight through the guy and into the other. Buck doesn't speak up. In the book he speaks up, but in the movie he doesn't. And everyone remembers Buck being in the meeting, so he doesn't really get fired from his job. So, in short, The movie could have taken an extra hour or so to add in some of those details. Maybe if they made it into a TV series, it actually would have been better.